Hi, my name is Ken.
And my name is Jason.
And today we're playing
Serpent's Tongue. So Serpent's Tongue was just actually released pretty much in January 2014. The lead designer was Christopher Gabrielson, although it was kind of a team effort, and I know it's kind of a family affair too. And it was the result of a very successful Kickstarter campaign. They got about 1,100% funding, so...
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah.
In Serpent's Tongue, you are actually playing the role of an awakened magi. In this case, an awakened magi... you yourself were actually once a magi in a previous life, and you've now awakened, and you've received a box of your previous belongings, your artifacts, your spells, and such like that.
So, to top it all off, this game pretty much never breaks character. So the starter box that you get is actually supposed to be your magi's chest that you have received from your past self, essentially. The spells that you're going to be casting are kept in these very nice... codices, so each one is a codex, and the spells, or inscriptions, actually have to be cast using a semantic and gestural component.
Well, outside the scope of this tutorial/review, there's actually an ARG component to this game, that's augmented reality game, for those not in the know, wherein you actually use the language of Serpent's Tongue to decode different mysteries in the pages in your actual codex, and on various things, like on the box itself, there's actually several different parts where there's like highlighted different runes and such that you can decode and try to figure out what it's actually saying. You can also, in the inscription packs, which are effectively booster packs for this game, you can find one card in there that actually you will be able to eventually redeem online for points that you can actually spend on getting more cards, and some of them are actually unique to this online system.
Yep.
Unfortunately, as of this review, that system is not actually online yet, but it hopes to be soon. They're hoping for this month.
Very shortly, next. And I mean they are a new company, and you know they've produced a pretty good product, I think. They're just working through a few issues, and I believe that they will have it up as soon as humanly possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have full confidence in them. So.
Mm-hmm. So as mentioned, there is actually a language involved in casting the spells in Serpent's Tongue. And this is actually a full language. There's a dictionary, there's grammar, there's everything, which you can find on the website. Low-level spells don't actually require you to really know a whole lot about it.
They're pretty easy.
They're pretty simple to cast. Whereas the highest level spells actually technically require you to read a full phrase in this language. Although you could, you know, memorize it semantically if you really want to. But you could also actually learn how to speak this language as a spoken language if you want to.
That sounds like a lot of work for a game, so if you're really dedicated to it, then yeah, you could totally do that. But for the purposes of playing the game, especially if you're going to be playing it casually, that may be a little out of your scope. But the game lends itself to either way. So without further ado, let's look at Serpent's Tongue.
So first of all, let's have a look at the components for Serpent's Tongue. First of all, we do have the cards. These are kind of the major component of Serpent's Tongue. I will note that they are actually 4x6, so this is about the size of a standard photograph. There's a lot of real estate here, and there's a lot of information. We'll go over what all of it means a little bit later in the episode. This is the Wizard's Codex, so these are sort of faux leather. They actually have special pages with pockets in them for all of the cards. And there's a lot of information in here. We'll mention a little bit more about that later. This is an energy tracker, so this is used to track the 3 energies, which you're going to be using throughout the game, and a bit more on those later. This is a focus gem, which represents your focus during the game. These are a couple of the tokens that are included with the game. They're actually referred to as chips for the purposes of this game. This is a duration chip and a durability chip. This is the 30-second spell timer, and this is the 10-sided die, which is included with the game.
Next we're going to talk about the setup for Serpent's Tongue. So this is less of a board game than what we would normally be doing. This is kind of more like a collectibles game. The first thing we should go over is how to actually set up your codex. In some cases, this would be like a deck for some people if you didn't have an actual wizard book to actually put them in. When constructing your codex, it must follow the following rules. You can have up to 20 Fluency 1 and 2 spells at the starting level. You can also have up to 5 Fluency level 3 spells. You can have up to maximum 2 4th level Fluency spells. Now just to explain that again, you have a total of 27 cards in your codex. Up to 20 can be Fluency level 1 and 2, up to 5 can be Fluency level 3, and up to 2 can be Fluency level 2. However, you can exchange higher level slots for lower level spells. If you're familiar with how a wizard prepares their spell book in Dungeons & Dragons, it kind of works like that. So that means you can have 27 spells in your codex, and all of them could be level 1 and 2 spells. Alternatively, you could have 7 level 3 spells if you use the 2 4th level allotments as level 3 spells. However, you can never have more than 2 level 4 Fluency spells. In addition to the 27 spells you're allowed to have in your codex, you may also have what's called a specialization. You play this card in addition to the 27 spells that you have. You also may have what's called an artifact. You may only have one of each of these, which means that you would have a total of 29 cards in your codex to start the game with. When constructing your codex, you can have spells arranged in any way you like. However, the very first page of your codex must remain blank. You'll be using this for later parts of gameplay. So now that you've constructed your codex, let's go on to the actual setup to play the game. Each player receives an energy tracker. Each player sets the essence on the energy tracker to 10, and the resonance and harmony begin at 0. Each player also receives 1 focus gem and 3 will. It should be noted that this nice plastic gem here is in fact a focus gem, but unfortunately one of them only comes with the game, so we're going to be using the focus gem chips instead of the actual gem. Each player also chooses a Magi chip. They are double-sided, so you have your choice of 2 different faces. For the remainder of the chips, place them in an accessible location in the center of the table. The chips you're probably going to want to look out for are things like the area and global area chips, the permanent duration chips, the durability and duration chips, and the rift tokens. There are a lot of other chips that you have, however, you probably don't need to have them all out. And also as a note, a lot of those chips are also used for the PvE version of the game, where you are playing against an environmental or encounter factor. So you don't necessarily need them for the base game. And now you are ready to play.
And now we're going to go over the gameplay of Serpent's Tongue. So first of all, there are 2 basic modes, PvP and PvE. In PvP, individual Magi, or teams of Magi, compete with one another, and in PvE, all players work together against an encounter card. We're mainly going to be showing the PvP mode here, and we probably won't have time to go over the PvE rules, but it is very similar. The only really different thing in there is how the encounter card works, and there's sort of a artificial intelligence component there. So each game round consists of 4 phases, which the players conduct in order. There is the initiative phase, the maintenance phase, spell preparation, and then the action phase. First of all, let's talk about the basic energies though, because these are kind of at the core of the game. You need to know how these work, what they're used for, and all of that. First of all, essence, which is the red energy at the very bottom here, is your life force. So if that goes to 0, you are out of the game, and you start with 10. Resonance, which is the top one, the blue one, is your stored magical power, and this is the main resource used to cast spells in the game. Harmony, which is the middle yellow one, represents how in tune you are with the magical weave of the area. If you have a high harmony, you could potentially have some very good things happen to you, and if you go too far into the negative, which is possible, bad things will happen to you. And if you do go into the negative, that's called discord instead of harmony. There are also these will chips. They are also considered a basic energy. They essentially represent your willpower. You do have a very limited amount to use though, and you don't often regain it. Next we're going to go over the anatomy of a card, because these are kind of the core of the game, so it's important to know what all of this stuff means. So first of all, at the top left is the spear of the card. Now there are 6 different spears. They encompass a bunch of different strategies and tactics you can use. So there is Soul, which is yellow, Mind, which is purple, Quantum, which is white, Bio is green, Matter is red, and Forces, which is shown here, is blue. Next we have the card title, in this case Frostbite. And then over in the top right, we have the spell type. There are a number of different types: attack, defense, enhancement, transmute, abjuration, component. I think there's a couple of others. But that's the type of spell, and that sort of delineates how you're going to be using it. Over on the right-hand side here, we see the broadcast bar. So typically this is turned towards your opponent so that they can see what this card is doing in sort of 1 or 2 words. On the other side, on the left, is the empowerments bar. So that gives sort of a synopsis of what this card does. So here we see that it has 2 duration and that it does 2 damage. Just below the empowerments bar is the energy cost of the card. So in this case, it shows that it costs 6 resonance and 1 harmony to cast this card. As a note, sometimes you will see numbers in blue here instead of the red, and that denotes that you actually gain some of that by casting the card. Directly below the costs is the aspect list. And again, this is kind of a synopsis of all of the different effects and things that this card has and keywords that it has. So in this case, it has the cold keyword, so some other spells might play off of that. It says damage 2, so again that denotes that it does 2 damage. And curse duration 2, which shows that it has a duration of 2. Below that, we have the rules section, so that'll show any special rules for the card, and it'll show any upgrades or requirements that it might have. Below that is the ritual path. We'll go over what that means later, but it's for this one it doesn't actually have one, it just says NA in all 4 slots. Down here we have the language section. So this is going to be a little bit different depending on what fluency level you're using. This is a fluency level 2 card, which is denoted by the 2 pips down in the very bottom right corner. This shows you how to speak the card, how to actually say the words that you need to cast it. Now this is the back of the card. One of the unique things about this game is that you're not actually allowed to look at the back of the card while you're playing. Well, the back of your cards, I should say. So this says exactly what you have to say to cast the spell. So in this case, Gitik. It also shows you the hand gesture that you need to make while casting the spell. Going back to the front of the card, this section here, if you decode it properly, will tell you what you need to say to cast the spell. When you cast the spell, you will be holding it up and your opponent will see the back of the card and they will tell you if you have cast it appropriately. I'm also going to go over the other 2 types of cards in the game, specializations and artifacts. You will only typically have one of each of these when you're playing, but it's important to know the different parts of it. So first of all, at the top is the name of the specialization, in this case Psych Warden. It also shows 2 little pips depicting the colors or spheres that this is sort of associated with, in this case purple, so Mind. There is an Initiate level ability right here, and that is an effect that you always have in the game, as long as this specialization is in play. Below that, there are 2 trees where you can upgrade the specialization during the game. Tree A and Tree B. Now, you do have to purchase the first tier of each tree before you buy the second one, but you can purchase these in any order other than that. So you could upgrade Tree A, then Tree B, then Tree A again, or you could start with Tree B and just do both of those. It's entirely up to you. In each case, there is a cost for upgrading. Typically this is going to be resonance, which is shown here, and then there is an ability that you gain for upgrading to that level. This is an artifact card. So artifacts will have a name along the top, as per usual. They will have a cost right here above the text of the card. In this case, it costs 1 will. Over here, you might also see a number of charges. In this case, 5, so that means that you would put 5 charge tokens on this at the start of the game. You remove 1 every time that it is used, and after all 5 are used, you can no longer use this artifact. Just below those is the actual rules for the artifact. So that tells you what it does whenever you activate it, In some cases it might be a passive effect, so it's just always on, but it will tell you exactly what it does. So now we're going to talk about zones. Each Magi has 3 main zones. An attack zone, which is where other players place cards which attack you. A defense zone, which is where you place defense cards or components. And an enhancement zone, which is any enhancements you currently have. So these are arranged one after the other, so the attack zone is in the center of the table effectively. Your defense zone is just behind it, and your enhancement zone is at the very back closest to you. It should be noted that your enhancement zone has a maximum of 4 cards that you can play in it at any time, and artifacts and specializations do count towards that limit. There are also 2 auxiliary zones. So the curse zone is to the left of the enhancement zone, and that's where any curses affecting you are placed. There's also the manifestation zone, which is to the right of your enhancements, and any spells that cost multiple actions to cast are going to be placed there until you have spent the allotted number of actions. If you ever play an ally card, then they also have all of these zones. Although for space purposes you're probably going to want to try and compress them a little bit more than in a Magi zone. Another important distinction, because it's pretty important to how a lot of spells work, is that a spell is considered offensive when you are casting it into an opponent's zone. It doesn't matter which zone particularly, but if you're casting it into your own zone, it is not offensive. If you're casting it into someone else's, it is. So now that all of the anatomy and everything is out of the way, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the phases. So the first phase that's going to happen every turn is the initiative phase, and the first thing that happens during the initiative phase is somebody is going to make a resonance roll. So one player rolls the die, and all players gain resonance according to the chart that's in the book, basically. To summarize though, on a 1 through 3, everyone gains 1. On a 4 through 6, they gain 2. 7 through 9 gets 3. And 10 gets a whopping 5. However, if a 10 is rolled, all players lose 1 harmony because of the overload of resonance. Next, players determine initiative. The player with the most harmony has initiative. If that is a tie, then it goes to resonance. If that is a tie, it goes to will, then to essence, and if it is still a tie, then it's a die roll. So as a result, because all of these things are equal for both players on the first round, you're always going to be rolling the die to see who goes first on the first round. Finally, any Magi who has 7 or more harmony or discord must make a roll. They roll 2d10, and if the total is less than their harmony or discord value, then an event occurs. So if they're making a harmony roll, then they actually gain 3 resonance. If they are making a discord roll, they gain 3 immediate unblockable damage. It's important to note that this also occurs immediately the first time that a player reaches 7 or 17 harmony or discord. Next up is the maintenance phase. So during the maintenance phase, all spells that are currently in play on the board are resolved based on their attributes. Any spells that have sustain costs must be paid for or discarded. Next, the spell effect occurs, and after the effect, there is a response phase, when people can respond to whatever just happened. And finally, if a spell has duration, then you remove one of the duration chips. If that brings it down to 0 chips, then it's discarded. As far as the order that spells are resolved, global spells are always resolved first, then area spells, and that's resolved by team in initiative order. Then each player, by initiative, resolves from their outer to inner zones. So they're going to resolve all of their attack spells, then their defense, and then their enhancements. After all spells have been resolved, you check victory conditions, and typically that is just that one player or team is incapacitated. So if that is the case, then the other player or team wins. Another important thing to note here is that during this phase and during the spell preparation phase, players may reattune spells, which means that they can move them from their discard pile back to their codex. This costs 1 plus the fluency level of the spell in resonance. So a fluency 1 spell costs 2, a fluency 2 spell costs 3, and so on. Typically, you can only reattune 1 spell per turn. However, if a spell has the bonded attribute, then you can actually reattune any number of those spells each turn, and they only cost 1. It's also important to note that players can also choose to dismiss any of their spells while it is being resolved. Next up is the spell preparation phase. So at this point, each player is going to look in their codex, select up to 3 spells that they want to prepare. They're going to take those spells and they're going to put them in the codex's front pocket. These spells are effectively the only spells that that player can cast during his turn. However, any spell that has the response attribute doesn't need to be prepared, so it can be cast at any time in response to another spell. In addition, any player may choose to flip the timer at any time. If they do that, they have to immediately close their codex, which means that they can't change what spells they have prepared, but all remaining Magi have 30 seconds to finish. Once the timer finishes, or everyone has voluntarily closed their codex, the phase is over. Finally, we have the action phase, which is the meat of the game when it comes down to it. So in initiative order, players take turns taking actions. So, for example, if I had initiative, I would take an action, then Ken would take an action, then I would take an action, and so on. Each player typically has 2 full actions that they are allowed to spend. Any spell that is marked free action does not take an action to cast, although it does take your turn. In the event that a spell says that it costs multiple actions, that spell is placed in the manifesting zone when it's first cast, and only put into play once the requisite actions have been spent. Players may also choose to pass and later take any remaining actions they might have. As a full action, a player may also meditate to gain 2 resonance and 1 harmony. After all players have passed and indicated that they do not wish to take additional actions, the round is over. As a couple of notes, first of all, if a player has an interrupt stone when their turn comes around, they must take an action to discard it, and that is their entire action. Also, spells that you control may be dismissed as a free action, which means that they can simply be discarded if you don't want them in play anymore. So how do you actually cast a spell? And this is really the core of the game, and this is one of the neat things about the game. So when you're casting a spell, there are sort of 3 subphases to it: speak, response, and activate. So when you are speaking a spell, you hold up the card so that your opponent can see the back and you can see the front. You speak the incantation, which you can figure out by looking at the language section, and I'll go over how that works in a second here. And you have to speak it while making the appropriate hand gesture. If you were correct, your opponent will say alum, which means success. If you were incorrect, your opponent will say kotuk. If spoken correctly, then we move on to the response phase. During the response phase, anyone may cast a response spell. If the response is not a free action, then the caster must collect an interrupt stone. So they're effectively using one of their actions out of turn, which they're going to have to pay back later. If it is a free action, however, you don't have to collect a stone. Responses follow this actual casting cycle on their own and get their own responses. So it can get a little difficult to track these things, but we think you're up to it. Finally, after all of this is over, the spell is placed in its target zone, any costs are paid, and it immediately takes effect. It should be noted that in some cases there may be a requirement, shown by an exclamation mark in the rules section. So in this case, this spell says that it requires a mind-hacked target. That means it can only be cast on a target who has a mind-hack spell affecting them. There could also be upgrades, which are sort of bonuses that you can get on a spell. This particular spell doesn't have one, but it is represented by an up arrow, and it will specifically say what you need to get that upgrade and what that upgrade does. A player may also choose to dismiss a spell that they are currently casting at any point before it activates. The action is still lost, but in some cases this may be a good idea because perhaps a response is being played which makes the card undesirable to play. So you always have that option. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of the language section. So this is how you actually figure out what you're supposed to say. Now, you could always simply memorize all of your spells if you like, but at least for the fluency level 1 and 2 spells, it's pretty easy to figure it out from the glyphs that are shown. So to speak a spell, first of all, let's go over pronunciation. So for the vowels, all vowels in Serpent's Tongue are actually pronounced just one way, unlike English where they could be pronounced a number of different ways. So it's a little bit simpler in that respect. So A is pronounced as in father, so ah. E is pronounced as in bet, so eh. I as in machine, so E. O as in taco, so O. And U as in flu, so U. There is additionally the KH sound, and that's pronounced as the CH in loch from, Scottish. So let's have a look at the different fluency levels and the language glyphs that are shown. So we're going to start with fluency level 1 spells. Fluency level 1 spells can actually be decoded with the Serpent's key, which is seen on one of the pages of the codex. So as you can see here, there's going to be an image of the Serpent's key along with a line. Now you're going to start with the circle, that is the first letter. Then you're going to move on to each successive dot, and you're going to end on the slash. So in this case, there are three nodes to it. So that means you're going to be saying 3 letters, and they are the letters that are shown on the Serpent's key. So in this case, it's going to be Shuk, Av, Kur. For Fluency 2 spells, it gets a little bit more complicated, although not by a whole lot. So in this case, it's going to show essentially the same symbol, and it's the same idea, but this time you're actually spelling out a word. So you're actually going to be looking at the individual letters and forming a word from that. You're also going to notice that at the top of the glyph is a number of symbols. Now these symbols are the Awatum script, and this is the actual script for the language of Serpent's tongue. So this is to kind of get you used to those letters. And right above that, there's also it actually tells you what that word actually means. So in this case, the word means augment, and the actual phrase that you would have to speak is shauk. Moving on to Fluency 3, this is where things get relatively complicated. So in this case, you're going to be speaking essentially a short phrase, usually of a couple of words. And there are going to be, there's going to be a separate glyph for each individual word you're going to be speaking. And you'll also notice that the glyphs are a little faded, so you have to work a little bit harder to decode these. As far as how to follow the lines and everything though, that's pretty much the same as Fluency 2, and the Awatum script is also there. And in this case, the phrase you're going to be speaking is Ezhau Shauk. Finally, the final fluency level, Fluency level 4, is the most difficult. There is no Serpent's key shown here at all, so you pretty much just have to decode the Awatum script if you want to do it during game. If you're not familiar with that, another option is to just simply memorize the phrase before the game. You're only ever going to have 2 Fluency level 4 spells anyway, so it's not that big a deal to memorize it, but if you want to actually learn the language, that's also an option, and you can use that to decode it. So in this case, the phrase that will be spoken is Shen Thol Naloth Shauk.
So as we've previously mentioned, there are 6 spheres of reality, and each one of them has a different hand sign. The signs are soul, mind, quantum, bio, forces, and matter. The hand signs are allowed to be performed with either of your hands, but the idea is that the palm is going to be facing the person that you're casting on. So if I was going to be casting it on you, and I was casting a matter spell, I would cast it this way. If I was casting it on myself, I would cast it towards myself. In addition to the various hand signs, there's also gestures you have to perform as well. Each type of card has a different gesture associated with it, and there are 7 types of cards. There are only 6 that require gestures, though. So bio is one of my favorites, so I'm going to be using bio as the example for all the gestures. And for the purposes of all these spells, I'm going to be casting it on you. There's attack. There's transmute. There's defense. There's abjuration. There's enhance. And there's ally. So The spheres are going to be fairly easy because you're probably only going to be limiting yourself to a couple spheres in your codex, but you're going to have to know pretty much all the gestures. Oh, and I mentioned that there's a 7th sphere that actually doesn't have a gesture. So say an example, if you're going to cast a card that is listed as a component, you don't do a gesture. You just hold up your hand towards the target, and the component is going to be cast into your defense zone, so that's fine.
Alright, so moving on. So many of the spells that you're going to be casting are attacks, because, well, that's the point of the game. So I thought it important to note that if a spell indicates damage, which is typically abbreviated DMG, this is always essence damage, unless it's specifically specified otherwise. So if you see something like harmony damage or resonance damage. Spells with the damage empowerment do damage immediately, and also on subsequent turns if they have a duration. Speaking of duration, if a spell has duration or durability, then when it is cast, that many duration or durability chips are placed on it. So for example, this has a curse duration of 2, so we would place 2 duration chips on it. For duration spells, one of these chips is removed every turn during the maintenance phase, as previously noted. However, if it's a permanent durability chip, then it remains on the card. If, however, the spell specifies that it has durability, then chances are, for one thing, it is a defensive spell, like a shield. Then a number of durability chips are placed on that spell equal to its durability value when it is first cast. And one durability is removed every time it blocks any amount of damage. So this is not based on the amount of damage, it's based on the act of taking damage. So if a spell is going to do 3 damage to you and it's blocked by a shield, you still only remove 1 durability. Next I'm going to talk about upgrades and ritual paths. So first of all, this card actually does have an upgrade section, and it reads, discard liquid component to force bearer to collect an interrupt stone on first impact. So again, this is something that very clearly says what you have to do to actually get the upgrade. You have to discard a liquid component that you already have, and it tells you what it does. It forces the person that you're casting it on to take an interrupt stone. As a note, the costs for upgrades can be almost anything, so it'll tell you. Ritual paths are along the bottom of the card, and here's one with an actual ritual path. So they may be upgraded from left to right, and they can be upgraded by either paying 1 harmony per tier, 1 will for 3 tiers, or by taking an interrupt stone for 3 tiers. Ritual path upgrades must be announced and paid for during activation. So that's when you're actually paying the costs of things. You can, however, choose to purchase them earlier in the cast cycle to make them inherent, in which case they have to be paid for immediately. Now that's the sort of thing where your opponent may, for example, try to block it or dismiss it, and one of the ritual path effects may prevent them from doing so. So you could then choose to upgrade the ritual path right then to prevent them from doing it, but then you have to pay the costs immediately. That said, if you do wait until the activation phase, then costs are simultaneous, so energy gained during activation can also be used to pay for ritual paths or upgrades. Going back to artifacts for a second, as mentioned, artifacts have activation costs, which are shown as icons on the left. In this case, it costs 1 will to activate this artifact. And artifacts may also have charges. So again, this has 5 charges. First of all, if an artifact has a passive effect, it is just always on. So you don't have to pay for it, it's just something that always affects you. If, however, it is activated, then activating that artifact is considered a free action. Artifacts may be voluntarily discarded at any time, but are then lost for the remainder of the game. And looking back at specializations, as mentioned, they will have an initiate ability, which is always on. And taking a tier in one tree does not prevent you from taking a tier in another. The first tier does have to be purchased before the second tier in that same tree, of course. So as far as purchasing them, though, players can actually spend 1 or 2 will to unlock the first or second tiers instead of the actual listed cost. Like artifacts, these can also be discarded voluntarily. Next up, let's talk about focus. Each player will have a focus gem. These are often used as a sustain cost for spells. So if a spell denotes that it does have a sustained cost of a focus, and that will be typically noted as duration F, or some such thing, then you must place your focus on that spell to sustain it. If your focus is ever discarded or burned, it can be reattuned just like a bonded spell. So something may cause you to discard it. It will go with your discarded spells essentially, and you can pay 1 resonance to reattune it. In the event that you are disrupted, you immediately discard your focus gem, and also any spells in your manifestation zone. Finally, let's talk about will. Spending will is always a free action response, and it can be spent in the following ways. You can spend 1 will to unlock the first tier of a specialization, 2 will to unlock the second tier of a specialization, 1 will to advance a ritual path by 3 tiers, or once per round, you can spend 1 will to purchase 3 resonance, 2 harmony, or 1 essence.
During this phase, we're each going to select 3 spells from our codex, and we're going to place them in the front of our codex.
And I am flipping the timer. Ken
Right.
now has 30 seconds to complete his preparations. Can he do it?
Alright, I'm complete. I'm just tucking my spells in at this point, and
You tuck those spells.
codex is down. So we're going to start with the player who has initiative. In this case, it is Jason. So starting with the player who has initiative, we take turns resolving our actions during the action phase. Something that I feel is important to do during this point, since every player has 2 full actions, hand each player 2 counters to represent their full actions. There are free actions you can take in the run of this round, and if without that, it's sometimes a little hard to track what you've actually done. Alright, Jason, your initiative, take it away.
So, I choose to cast a spell. Shocking, I know.
This is shocking.
So, because I am casting a spell, the first thing I do is I hold the spell up so that I can see the front and Ken can see the back. So, at this point, I have to speak the actual spell, and I have to perform a gesture. Ses harcourt.
Alright, so Jason has performed, I'm looking at the back of the card, Jason has performed the correct hand signal. He's also performed the gesture with this as well. This is an attack card, right?
Yep.
And he has successfully said the words here. You're probably going to want to be nice to your opponents when you're playing the first few games as far as pronunciations go, but Jason did get this correct as far as I can tell. So, that was a successful spell. So, Allume.
Alright, so at this point, the spell has been spoken. We now enter a response phase. So if Ken wants to cast a response to the spell, he may do so.
I don't have any responses I wish to play, so we continue on. Technically speaking, if Jason had any responses to his own spell that he wished to play, he would play those at this phase as well.
Yes, and this is the sort of spot where you could actually upgrade your specialization, for example, because that is a free action response. In any case, at this point we go through the activation, because this has been successfully cast and nothing is blocking it at this point. So it's going to be placed in the appropriate area. So this is a curse, so it's going to be placed in Ken's curse zone, right here.
Which, while it is placed to the side of the enhancement zone, does not count as an enhancement, because it's not helping me.
No, it's sort of a sub-zone off to the side.
Yes.
At this point, I am going to pay the cost, which actually is a positive cost, so I actually gain 2 resonance for this, putting me up to 5. Next up, this has a curse duration of 2, so we're going to place 2 duration chips on it to denote that. And finally, it has a spell loss value of 1. So there's actually an explanation in the rules, and it reads, when Mind Hack activates, target must banish 1 spell from their codex.
And banish means removed from game, not discarded. So this means that I would no longer have access to the spell for the rest of the game.
As a note, however, and this is where my artifact comes into play, my artifact reads, when an opponent's spell is banished, place it under the snare. So I can then cast any spell that Ken has banished, essentially, using this artifact.
I'm choosing to banish the spell Parasitic Metastasis.
So I tuck that under here. So that was effectively my action. So I used a full action to cast the spell, so I'm going to discard one of my chips here. And it is now Ken's turn.
Alright, so for my card, I've chosen to play Flame Form. This is a Forces Sphere card. It's an enhancement. And I'm going to pronounce it and do the gesture. Ki Ta Ghoul.
Alum.
This now generates the response phase. Jason, do you have a response to this card?
I am just looking now. So I choose not to respond to that.
As a free action response to my own spell, I'm actually going to use one of my, or enhance one of my tiers. However, also as a free action response to my free action response, kind of chaining up commands here a little bit, I'm actually going to choose to spend 1 point of will to gain 3 resonance immediately. Since Jason's not playing anything at this point, we resolve these in order of last played to first played. So the first thing that happens is I spend my will, then I enhance one of my trees. I'm choosing to enhance tree A of the Life Chanter tiers here, which gives me Bio Empowerment, which doesn't affect the spell played. It does, however, cost me 2 essence to do so. And then finally, the Manifesting spell comes into play. It has a duration of 2. The spell Flamethrower cost me 3 resonance, so I take that now. And that was a full action, so I return one of these chips back to the pool. I just realized I didn't actually explain what my Ring of Mastery was when I was doing that whole thing. Rather than do it all over again for you guys, I'm just going to go back to this point. Normally the Life Chanter's first tier would cost 4 essence. However, the Ring of Mastery says that specializations cost 2 less points of resonance to unlock. So if I'm using resonance, they cost 2 less points. All right, Jason, you're up.
So now I have to select one of my 2 remaining spells. Alright, so I choose to play Enemy Within. So at this point, I am going to speak the spell. Ease my ease.
Alum?
So now we go into a response phase. Do you have a response?
I do not have a response to that spell.
Okay, that's what I was hoping for. So now I have to put all the chips and everything on here. So first of all, I have to pay 2 resonance. That is the cost. I'm going to do that now. Then we are going to place this in the appropriate zone. So this is an attack spell, so it goes into Ken's attack zone. It should be noted that it does have a requirement of a Mind Hack target. Mind Hack is the spell that I've already cast, so that requirement is met. This has a duration of F, so that means I have to place my focus there to maintain it. And as far as the effect goes, this does 1 damage, but as you can see in the rules section, it says, target may sacrifice 2 spells rather than take damage. So Ken, would you like to lose 2 more of your spells, or would you like to take 1 point of damage?
So when Jason casts a spell, it impacts me immediately, and yeah, I'm gonna take the 1 point of damage. That's pretty negligible, and losing 2, unless this was a game-changing, like, end of the game sort of thing, it'd be a pretty bad idea for me to take that those 2 spells.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm going to lose my last full action chip, and it goes back to Ken.
So I'm choosing to play Cellular Augmentation. This is a bio spell. It's an enhancement, and I'm going to pronounce it, and it's pronounced Shuk of Kur.
Alum.
Because of the first tier that I chose in my Life Chanter tree, I'm choosing to make this a free action because it is a bio enhancement. So this would be manifesting and played into my section. Jason, do you have any response to this?
I actually do.
Okay.
Although it has nothing to do with your spell. I have just realized that I probably should have upgraded my specialization a little while ago, but I'm going to do that as a free action response at this point.
Okay.
I'm going to upgrade the Dimension Siphon ability, which states that all mind curses gain +1 resonance. That is all I have, though.
Alright, so I don't have any responses to my own this time. So this is going to be played into my enhancement section. This means I have reached my cap of 4 enhancements. This is unique to bearer, and this itself is more like a component for later spells for me, but it could potentially gain me health during the maintenance phase if I choose to spend something on it. It also does not cost me anything to play. It has a duration of 3, so I placed 3 duration chips on it. However, it was a free action because of my Life Chanter ability, so I still have 1 full action remaining. Jason, do you have any actions left to play?
Well, I have used all of my full actions at this point. So at this point, all I can do is either take a free action or pass. I'm going to choose to pass.
Okay, and passing now doesn't mean he's passed permanently. If it came back around to him again, he could, in theory, still play a free action if he had one. So back to me. I'm going to use my last full action to try to cast Infernal Shot. This is a forces spell. It is an attack, and I'm going to pronounce it Ki-ol-ease.
Alum.
All right. This is played into Jason's attack section. So I've placed it into Jason's attack section, but it's still manifesting. It has a response phase. Jason, do you have a response?
I may. I'm actually going to respond by casting another spell, Hallucinatory Decoy. So I'm going to speak Hitso.
Alum.
So, now that the spell has been spoken, first of all, it gains its own response phase. Do you want to respond to my response, Ken? Actually, I should also note at this point, while Ken's deciding that I am going to, at this point, upgrade the ritual path all of the way, so that this is a free action instead of a full action response.
Ooh.
So that requires 4 tiers of upgrade, so I'm going to have to use 1 will, and I'm going to lose a harmony.
I don't have a response that would apply to this, so Jason, take it away.
Alright, so this spell activates. I have to pay 2 essence. It does have a requirement, Mind Curse on controller of any evaded effect. Well,
I have Mind Hack.
He is Mind Hacked, so that's all good. There is an upgrade. I could pay 2 Resonance to remove Mind Curse requirement. I don't need to do that, and I don't have it anyway, so it's all good. And this is an evade, so it allows me to evade essentially any sphere other than mind itself, and so I will be evading this spell. So
Jason has played a defense, and that means that for this I can not get through there. Because Infernal Shot does not have a duration, it is played and resolved immediately, and then it goes. So Infernal Shot would have dealt 2 essence damage to Jason because of my flame form. However, it does 0 damage because Jason was able to evade it. Lucky schmuck.
Hallucinatory Decoy also does not have a duration, so it is also discarded.
Alright, that was a full action for me, so I return this chip. Jason.
I pass.
And I am also going to pass.
Alright, so since obviously neither of us are going to continue by playing any other spells or any other effects, the round ends. So in the interest of time at this point, we aren't going to go through another full round because I feel that we've kind of covered the basics here. We are going to go through the first couple of phases though, just to give you an idea of how the maintenance phase works, because that's rather important.
So we're going to start with the initiative phase. First off, we have a resonance roll. Jason, do you want to roll a 10?
Sure.
Jason,
that is a 5.
Since Jason rolled a 5, that means we both collect 2 resonance. Next we check for the initiative order. So first off, initiative is checked with the highest harmony. Jason just took a harmony loss, if I recall.
Yes.
So that means that I have 0 harmony to his -1 harmony. Therefore, I have highest in harmony, which means I take initiative without having to roll any further. Neither of us need to roll for discard or harmony events, so then we go on to the maintenance phase. Now again, this is the last phase for us because we're just showing you how the last phase essentially resolves here. First, we resolve global area effects. There are none. We then resolve area effects. There are none. Then Magi resolve their fields, starting with the Magi with initiative. In my field, starting the furthest out and working in, I have the enemy within as an attack card played on me. So this is Jason's card. If it had any sustained effects, he would have to resolve them now as this card is resolving. It doesn't though, so we continue on. Effectively, this is going to deal 1 damage to me. If I wanted to, I could sacrifice 2 spells rather than taking damage. Sacrificing spells in this case would mean that they're just simply discarded, not banished like the previous time that my spell was lost. I am going to choose to take that 1 damage, though.
As a note, there is technically a response phase in there, but...
Yes, when the spell impacts, so this is referred to as impacting, there is another response phase. However, in this case, I don't have anything, and I'm not sure if Jason has anything he would want to do at this point either.
I don't.
Technically speaking, if you wanted to, you could upgrade your tier, if that was relevant to you.
Yep.
But it's not at this point for either of us, so we're going to move on. Enemy within is resolved. It has a duration of focus, and Jason has not lost his focus in any way, so we continue on. I don't have anything played in my defense zone, which would actually be in between the attack and enhancement zones here, so we'll move on. So since I have no defenses, we move on to the curse zone next. Starting with Jason's mind hack. So first off, if there are any sustained conditions, those would happen first. There are not. Then the spell impacts. When mind hack activates, target must banish 1 spell from their codex. So I'm going to have to do this again because I don't have anything. There would have been, sorry, there also is a response phase in between those points as well, but I think I've already established I don't have something I can actually do with that. So my banish spell, I'm going to choose to banish leprosy. All leprosy has been now banished. You're welcome, everyone.
And of course, I get to put it under my artifact.
So the spell is impact, so duration chip is removed. Next, I get to choose the order of activation for my different spells here. I'm going to choose to do cellular augmentation. So it actually doesn't do anything except tick down. Cellular augmentation, as I mentioned before, is a spell that sets up my later spells. It doesn't have anything to sustain either. Then I have Flame Form. Pay 1 to sustain. I'm going to choose to sustain it for now, paying the cost of 1, and its duration ticks down by a step.
So that is all of the spells on the board. They've all been resolved. So at this point, we would move on to the spell preparation phase.
Alright, so Jason, what do you have to say about Serpent Song?
Well, first of all, I honestly think this is one of the best ideas for a game that I've seen in a while.
It's a really innovative game.
Yeah, and there's so much to it, and I really like that it's kind of it gives you a lot of options in how you want to play it. You can get like really into it, get really into like decoding all of these secrets. You can learn the language. If you just want to be casual, that's fine too. You can play, you know, player versus player. You can get a group together and play versus environment. In fact, there's going to be an RPG campaign coming out that uses this.
Nice.
Yeah. So, you know, there's just so much here in essentially just one core game. And it's relatively cheap, too.
I'd have to say, like, I spent more on this than I would have, say, on a board game. And actually, I actually split this with Tristan 6. So we actually spent a bunch on it and split it. I'd have to say that the biggest downside of it was the shipping cost, because it's not available in stores yet, like because they don't have a global release yet. So you do have to get it from their website, and their shipping is kind of hefty. Although admittedly, you're getting a really fat game out of this. It's a very heavy game, so it's kind of understandable.
Well, not to mention the fact that the actual components really look nice.
They do look really nice.
I mean, the fact of the matter is, a few weeks ago, I brought my codex over to show Ken because I thought it was such a cool game, and him and Tristan basically ordered it on the spot.
Basically, within that same week, we were like, we have to get this game.
Yeah.
I was not looking... I mean, this is a very different thing from what we would normally be reviewing on this show.
Yeah.
Because, as I and Jason were saying off camera, this is effectively a CCG. Now, it's a little bit different than your standard CCG. You're not just building a little deck here. There's a lot more involved to this than just that. So, I would throw it up at the board game level. It's like, we won't be reviewing Magic the Gathering anytime soon.
No.
Or anything like that.
No.
This is a little different, though. There's a lot more to this than just a simple card game. But it is effectively still a collectibles game. It's a collectible card game, even though the spells in this, the cards in this case are spells, and there's much more going on there. And when Jason was explaining this game to us, I was immediately, like, I was impressed by the components, but I was immediately reserved because I didn't really want to get into another collectibles game. But honestly, even if you just got the base level game, let's say you considered this game to be a board game, and you got the basic chest. Now, Tristan and I ended up splurging, and we got all these extra inscription packs, which are effectively booster packs, like for a normal like collectibles type game. And we splurged, like, we got one of the chests. No, this is the chest.
Archive
it's
case.
The archive case. Yeah, we got one chest of archive, or we got one archive case rather, one archive of boosters, inscription packs.
Yes,
they're boosters, and. In theory, though, if you wanted to just play this like a board game, you could just go with just the chest, which would be less expensive, little less customizable, but there's still a lot of cards in there. Like me and Tristan, in the chest you get 2 books. This is actually Jason's book, but Tristan and I actually have our own books. And you get 2 of those, and all the components you need to play the game. You get all these other little things like the PvE, and you can play PvP. There's the solo sort of thing against PvE, player versus environment, and player versus player, for those not in the know. Yeah, there's just so much going on with this game. I was sold pretty immediately, I have to say. I think this was an excellent game. I was kind of sad I didn't actually get it on the Kickstarter in retrospect.
Yeah, me too, but, you know, I pre-ordered it, so I still get a few of the perks, not quite all of them. But
yeah, me and Tristan got it after the pre-order bit that Jason got, so we didn't get quite all the perks. But we still got some pretty cool stuff out of it, too.
As far as actual ratings go, I am personally going to give this a 4.5 meeples out of 5. Again, I really think that this is one of the best ideas I've seen in a while. I really wanted to give it a 5. There were a couple of things, though. First of all, there were some component issues. To start off with the energy trackers, the wheels are actually placed a little bit too close together, so you know, you should be able to just take it and use your thumb on the side to move them. You can't because the wheels
if you
lock.
do that, it'll end up locking with the other wheel and turning the other wheel, so it's a little frustrating. Also, I found that the energy trackers themselves, I think it's the hole is just a little too big, which is like, that's a really precise thing.
Yeah,
like to get this perfect. But I guess if for future components, how easy this would be, but to have them maybe I don't know, half a centimeter each further to the side, even if some of the wheels were exposed on the side a little bit, I don't think that would be that too big an issue.
Well, no, the issue is that they just get too close together, so that's a problem. In addition, the actual codexes, the fronts kind of bubble.
Even the back's a little bit too. I was really disappointed with that.
You know what? It's not honestly that noticeable, but it is definitely a thing.
But every now and then I have to pet my poor wizard book and remind it that I still love it. So it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know, maybe it's like an intentional thing where I have to actually like pay attention to it and make sure the glue is still keeping everything down. I don't think that this is in any risk of falling apart anytime soon, mind you. They're still very well put together. But it was just a little disappointing that, I mean, there's only so much you can do with that. I mean, this is like the first time we've ever had a game like this before. So.
Plus, I mean, these people are new to this industry, and I feel that there were kind of some production issues on the production company side.
There's that probably as a case too.
So, you know, I don't want to really dock them too much for that.
Actually, we know that there are some production side issues, like not that were out of their hands, because there was an issue with, say, the inscription packs, like the archive box. So the one that I and Tristan 6 got, we ended up with, so there's one rare card in every inscription pack, and the rare card, as I understand it, is either a specialization, an artifact, or a level 4 spell. And in the inscription packs we got, it was all 4th level spells. And apparently there was some sort of issue with the way things were randomized, and I guess that this was like a thing where some archive boxes just have that as a problem, and that wasn't supposed to be the case. Like, I guess the 4th level spares are supposed to be like a lot rarer.
I don't honestly know the exact proportions there are supposed to be, but as far as that goes, like, I got an archive case as well, and I didn't have that problem. I got a smattering of all of them.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I feel like just through sheer random chance, we should have, like, if we'd gotten at least one artifact or one specialization through those, I would have just said, oh, well, it was just complete random chance, whatever. Yeah. But it was entirely 4th level spells? I don't know, just a random chance. I don't think that was
seems a little off, yeah.
Unless it just turns out maybe the specializations and the artifacts are incredibly rare, and Jason actually ended up with getting a lucky box. So
I don't know.
Who knows?
In any case, the other point that I want to make as far as that goes is that the rules are fairly complex, which in and of itself isn't that big a deal. I mean, we do a lot of beefy games, and this isn't really that hefty compared to some of them. And
this is the point of doing tutorial reviews, is so that when we have a big, heavy, beefy game, others can look at this and say, wow, this game is really hard to do, and hopefully this actually helps you.
For sure.
This game is really new to both of us, though, and it is possible, and I really apologize in advance if we screwed anything up during this thing. I feel like you had everything right. Like, everything I think is down there properly. But if we messed something up, we're really sorry in advance.
Yeah, and the rulebook isn't laid out as well as it could be. I don't think it's quite to the Fantasy Flight level, but
I'd compare it.
I don't know.
I mean, that might be, I don't know, maybe that's too harsh.
Regardless, though, we did actually have to spend a good deal of time looking things up while we were doing the review, because a few things came up.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not that big of a deal for me in this case, and because I mean the rulebook is still relatively small, and they do provide a lot of examples and stuff. So anyway, I docked it a half a point for those two things. So 4.5 is where I'm at.
All right. Well, I am just going to look into here and I am going to pull a 4 meeples out of here. I'm getting a 4 out of 5, and the main reason I'm giving it half a point less than Jason is I actually have the same problems Jason does. I put a little higher weight on them being issues, though. I feel like this game is already really intimidating with the language component it's got going on. I know I've explained this to a few of my friends, and a few of them just outright laugh at the idea of playing this game, because it sounds really silly. And we're very aware that this is kind of a silly game. Like, the thing that's really cool about it is it takes itself so seriously. It's absolutely wonderful. But it's also really, really easy to not take it so seriously because of the fact that it takes itself so seriously. It's like when you're watching a movie that is like so bad it's good. And I'm not saying this is like a game that's bad it's good. It's actually a good game, but I'm just using that as an example. So like you laugh at a movie that's so bad it's good and it's still a good movie even though it's like absolutely terrible. Most of our friends have pretty much just made fun of us for this game. It's like, wow, you're like casting wizard spells at each other, eh? Like that's a whole lot of silly. But I keep on having to explain to people that we're aware that this game is incredibly serious/silly. The game is still good enough that it doesn't even matter. I don't care about that, and honestly, if you judge a game based on just doing silly hand gestures and stuff like that, I mean, we have a background in Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. Like,
yeah.
I don't think we have any, like any of us or any of our friends really have any right to make fun of us for playing a wizard game. So, anyway, like I said, I have the same problems Jason did. I have a little higher weight on them. Another thing I like that Jason didn't actually point out though, with the way that the fluency level is structured, it's incredibly intimidating going into it, and I don't feel it loses points for that. Actually, I'm going to compliment it on it. It's really intimidating, but the way it's set up, so we had those 4 spells, or 4 levels of cellular augmentation. And if you go through all 4 of those, if you had all 4 of them in front of you, you can see very clearly the first level spell tells you the most important word. It's augment, I believe is what it says, right?
Yes.
Is augment? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So augment is the most important word there, and it's spelled out entirely on the very first card. But you only have to say a couple of the letters, not all the letters. Then in the second card, you actually have to say that word, which you can look back at the previous card and say, oh, there's that word again. So you know that's going to be the case. In the third level one, because the second level fluency is actually using the runes now, in the third level card, you can actually look back at the second level card and say, oh, look, I recognize those runes. So there's really only one more word you have to decipher there. It looks more intimidating than it actually is. And then the fourth level card, it's still using those 2 words from the previous card, I believe, as well. Therefore, it looks intimidating, but if you had all 4 of them, like all levels of fluency, you kind of have like a tutorial for this one type of spell. This isn't always going to be the case, though, with all the cards, though.
Well, I mean, when it comes down to it, it's really clever in that if you think about it, it's they're essentially teaching you the language in the same way that children learn to read. You learn your letters first, then you learn how to form them into words, then how to say like simple phrases, and then how to say a full sentence.
That's a good point. It's actually very well put out like that.
Yeah.
This game is amazing, and I'm giving it half a point less than Jason. Don't take that as me saying, oh, I'm not sure about this game. 4.5 out of 5 meeples is still really good. Between the 2 of us, though, that's going to give us a grand total of
8.5 meeples.
Which is a pretty good score. This is the first Kickstarted game we've ever actually run on this show.
Yep.
I'm really happy that it's Serpent's Tongue, because this is a great game. I'd really like to see what other products they get to put out in the future, and I'm excited to buy more things from them. I really hope that one day I can go to my local friendly gaming store and pick up an inscription pack of Serpent's Tongue spells, because that would be amazing. Yeah, I'm really happy with this game.
Yeah, me too.
I'd say it's an illume. That's wizard for success.
I know that. Alright, so that's all we have today. Join us next time for Puerto Rico.
That's right. Until then, see you next time and have good games.